Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Alfonso David. I am the president and the CEO of the Global Black Economic Forum. I'm also a civil rights lawyer.
And hello, everyone. I'm Ebony McMorris. I'm the White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. And we are so pleased and excited to be here tonight. I'm so happy to be co-hosting this amazing town hall. Y'all, paint the polls black.
So for folks who are just joining us, maybe this is your first time, but we started this process earlier this year. We launched, Paint the Polls, which is a voter awareness, voter registration, and voter mobilization initiative that's supported by the Sundial Group of companies, which includes Essence, the Global Black Economic Forum, Girls United, Afropunk, Refinery 29, BeautyCon, and the New Voices Foundation. Our goal is to educate, mobilize, and register voters to take action this November and into the future. We hosted our very first town hall in the beginning of August this year with a number of guests, including Congresswomen Jasmine Crockett and Shontel Brown, Bakari Sellers, and others. Now, 3 months later, tonight, we are hosting our final town hall before Election Day, where we're going to talk about all of the things Election Day, all of the things you need to know about for Election Day, and helping you finalize your plan to vote, and hearing from people who are voting early and in the final push to get out the vote before the polls close tomorrow.
So we've got a few housekeeping rules. This is a nonpartisan call focused on voter registration and mobilization. Further, it's not a fundraising call. So there are other events focused on fundraising. Here, we will be answering your questions. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll try to answer as many as we can before the end of the town hall.
And so for the first few weeks of our town halls, we focused a lot on voter registration. So that is now passed, we know. But if you've already registered to vote and you're voting tomorrow, you can also check your registration to make sure that it is accurate. You can do that at vote.gov. You can also find resources at Paint the Polls Black. And finally, sit back and relax and enjoy the town hall. So to begin this town hall, we want to spend a few minutes on the current status of the presidential race and some congressional races around the country. To help us unpack all of what is before us, we would like to welcome author Alencia Johnson to help us set the stage for where we are currently. In addition to running her own consultancy for several years, Alencia has worked on the last 5 presidential campaigns and is currently working with the Harris-Walz campaign. Alencia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for having me. It's such an important night. It's like my Super Bowl right now.
Well, it's important, right? This is it. Tomorrow is Election Day. Already 76 million people have already cast their vote through various forms of early voting for national, state, and local races. And to start with, I want to ask you a question that I get all the time. And it's increased with frequency over the last few days. And the question I often get is, who is going to win? So can you tell us how you respond to that question? Because I assume you get that question quite often. You're on television stations all over the country. You're working for the Harris-Walz campaign. What's your response to that question when people ask you who's going to win this election?
Well, this cycle, I actually try to educate them on how election nights typically go. Sometimes they will not be called exactly on Tuesday night, given the rules around being able to count the early voting ballots as well as the mail-in ballots. Obviously, as you can see my shirt, it says vote for her and her and her. I do believe that Vice President Harris will win. Now, I caveat that with, that means we cannot take our foot off the gas, right? Tomorrow is the last day to vote, meaning people have been voting early. We've seen a lot of unprecedented early voting numbers. We've seen a lot when it comes to women voters, first-time voters that are showing up. But that's not the full picture. The only way that she does win is if folks show up tomorrow. I know this is nonpartisan, but y'all know I'm a bit partisan here. I do believe that she will win. The other thing I will say, as we talk about this election and who will win tomorrow, there's another candidate who is actually out there already saying that the election is rigged, that the election is not going to go the way that they want it to. And I do think we have to make sure that we are paying attention to news sources like the Associated Press and waiting for them to call the election.
Lindsay, let me ask you about some of the poll results. So we hearing about how you feel who is going to win and which way you think, but we've seen a lot of different polls swing one way or the other, whether it'll be educated women that would help push this. We saw also new polling come out of Iowa, and she's up 3 points there. But when we look at the totality of the polls, we know we can't lean too hard on them because there was no red wave like it was predicted, a lot of things. What are the polls saying though?
Well, look, I'm glad you actually brought up there was no red wave, and you were referring to, for the viewers who may not understand that reference, you're referring to the 2022 midterms when a lot of Republicans felt as though they were going to have this red wave and take back the House of Representatives. But what also happened in 2022, and this is a key piece of the polling and the way that we should analyze this polling, what also happened in 2022, the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, the protections of abortion access. In addition to all my campaign work, I worked for Planned Parenthood for 6 years, and we knew that abortion, whenever they got the opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade and seat Supreme Court justice who would do that, they would do it and they would overturn it, and they did. But we also knew that that would be a deciding issue. And that in 2022, all this polling, I would sit on national television with all these white male pollsters and DC insiders trying to tell me that abortion would not be a deciding issue for a lot of voters. The exit polling in 2022 showed that it was a priority issue for not just women voters, but for some voters of color and young people. And that's why the Republicans since 22 have only held a majority by a handful of seats. So fast forward to 2024, where we are right now, a lot of the polling isn't fully capturing how abortion access is going to shift folks' opinion once they get into the ballot box. We've seen anecdotal information that there are Republican women, that is their hard line. I mean, I think there could have been a lot of other things that could have been their hard line, but they're finally here. That's fine. We know that abortion access is on the ballot in states like Florida, Nevada, and Arizona. That can not only impact the presidential race, but also the Senate races in those states as well. And so the polling, I would continue to say, look at it as an indicator, but not the full picture, because you will see on television that the economy, immigration, all of these issues are number one issues for folks. But abortion is actually a number one issue for a lot of people. And that is an issue that people tie to either freedom or their economy. So we have to make sure we're going into these conversations around polling with the full scope, and also understanding that they can be wrong. They were wrong in 2016 about Secretary Clinton, and they were wrong a little bit in 2020. We've seen some polling this cycle that have quite a few people confused. The only poll that matters, I tell people all the time, the only poll that matters is the exit polling after Election Day tomorrow.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because as you know, we mentioned in the beginning of this segment that 76 million people have already cast their votes. And of course, a question that someone could derive from that is, well, is there anything we can glean from the folks who are voting early, right? They're going to the polls. They've gone in we think, significant numbers, 76 million. What do we know from the early voting numbers and the results of those numbers? Do we know anything? Or do we know, can we sort of reach certain conclusions based on the number of people who have voted and maybe the direction that they voted in?
I think it can give us an indication of trends. Listen, some of these numbers are unprecedented in certain states. They are historic numbers. And on one hand, though, we have heard that in some states, the early vote turnout numbers are higher for Republicans than Democrats. And in 2020, that was in reverse. Democrats had a higher early voting and mail-in ballots. Now, also 2020, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. We didn't even have vaccines then, right? So voting was a little bit different then. We've also seen a lot of voter suppression laws enacted in certain states. And some states have also actually made voting a lot easier. That's probably playing a factor into some of the early voting numbers. But I will say the number one thing that it is telling us is that there is an enthusiasm around this election. There's an enthusiasm around a new way forward. There's enthusiasm around just getting our country back to a place where we can talk about issues and move forward. We are seeing in counties all over mail-in ballots coming in at record numbers. And so that is telling us that there's energy, but that doesn't mean that we should slow down and not show up tomorrow or even try to get people out tomorrow, because in some states, you can register on the same day as election day and cast your ballot too. And so be part of this enthusiasm. That is the conclusion that we can tell right now. But one other conclusion that we can make is that new registered voters are extremely excited right now because their numbers are turning out in high numbers.
Alencia, in addition to the presidential race, we always talk about that, but we also got to talk about Congress, right? So Democrats and Republicans are fighting over control over Congress with key Senate and House races that we see, while many of these key races overlap with some of the battleground states like in Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, there are also some solid blue and red states whose competitive races are an interesting foray into the future of both parties. So we see in Montana, incumbent Democrat Senator Jon Tester, third-generation Montana farmer, facing Republican Tim Sheehy. And Senator Tester is the only statewide elected Democrat. It's a particular interesting race as Montana is solidly a red state in the presidential election and had in the past few years influx of wealthy, many of them conservative transplants from other states shifting the political landscape. So what should people know about the importance of these Senate races when it comes to the presidency?
Well, absolutely. I'm so glad you're stressing that because we are all paying attention to the presidential race. But if we want, again, I am expecting and hoping that I will be saying Madam President Kamala Harris tomorrow night, or at least by the end of the week. But in order for her to put forth that agenda that she has been campaigning on that I wholeheartedly support, we have to have a Senate that can pass those pieces of legislation. And beyond just passing those pieces of legislation, the Senate is important to confirm not only the appointments to the administration, but also the Supreme Court justices. The next president will be able to appoint at least 2, if not more, Supreme Court justices, and that is extremely important. You mentioned also in these states that are solidly either blue or red, there is, right, in Montana, Senator Tester, who is there. Obviously, he's a Democrat, and that's a red state. There are places like that where sometimes people split the ticket, where they vote for one person, and whether it's a Senate or a member of Congress, for a Democrat, and then the presidential race, they vote somewhere else, or they don't vote at all. The other thing I do want to mention is that in states like New York and California, where we call these blue states when it comes to the presidential race, but there are some competitive House seats in those states as well. And the reality is that we have an opportunity, not just at the presidential level, to have our first Black woman president, our first woman president, our first Black woman president. If the House flips to Democrats, the leader of the House will be the Speaker of the House, will be Hakeem Jeffries, and that will be the first Black Speaker of the House, which can be huge. The other thing that's happening, and I'm thinking about another deeply red state that has a competitive now Senate race, we're talking about Texas. Colin Allred is giving Ted Cruz a run for his money. If Colin wins, that's another Black senator that we will have. And so I challenge you all to look down ballot at the Senate races, at the House seats. Yes, all 435 seats are up for election or re-election. And then also look at those ballot measures, because that is how the president is able to enact their agenda. Or if the outcome isn't what we wanted at the presidential level, that's how we can have members that will stop that dangerous agenda. But I don't think we're going to have to worry about that second piece.
So when Alencia, when you were talking, our producers put up on the screen 2 maps that I want to just make sure we have an opportunity to go through quickly for folks to understand. Let's just put up the Senate map so folks can understand the current framework that we're thinking about in terms of the U.S. Senate. So if you see where the blues are, it says is leaning Democratic. You see where the red or pink, if you will, it says is leaning Republican. And then you see the toss-ups, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Alencia, is there anything else that you want to add as it relates to this map for folks to understand?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, these ballot measures around abortion, there are ballot measures to enshrine abortion rights in Nevada and Arizona, some other states as well, but they're not on this map. Those ballot measures will impact the Senate race in both Nevada and Arizona. And so Nevada, Democrats are defending a seat. In Arizona, we are trying to pick up a seat. They are running, Republicans are running Kari Lake, who is very much a Trump in a woman's body and not very popular. And so it will be a very interesting race. In Texas, I mentioned Texas, we talked about Montana. Pennsylvania is going to be extremely interesting because Senator Casey is trying to defend his seat. And we know that that is a very close race because of the presidential race, along with Michigan and Wisconsin. You know, the Senate, the best case scenario, I think folks are predicting, is that there's a 50-50 Senate, and then you hope that the vice president is there to be the tie-breaking votes, depending on which party it is. And so it is really important that we're paying attention to these seats and that we see that the map could shift depending on how some of the Senate races turn out. And I will say, the other piece I will say about the Senate races, and someone actually challenged me on this when I think I was on CNN talking about this. And oftentimes we talk about how the top of the ticket, has an influence on Senate races, the House races, state legislatures, and down ballot races, right? But I actually believe that some of these candidates that are running, a lot of these candidates running for Senate and House, they're exciting candidates that are getting people to actually look at the top of the ticket, right? There was a time when a lot of folks weren't paying attention to the presidential race, when conversation around President Biden, whether he should exit the race or not, people were not excited about the presidential race, but they were excited about the Senate race because they could clearly understand the power that the Senate has. And I think that has been crystallized because of Supreme Court decisions, like we talked about the Dobbs decision, but also overturning affirmative action, the Chevron deference, giving the president unchecked power. People are now realizing how incredibly important these Senate seats are. And so I do believe that those are actually influencing the way that people are voting for the president as well.
So before we end our segment with you, let's just focus briefly on the House. In the House of Representatives, there are races that are in solidly blue states, such as New York and California. And those races are ultimately going to inform and maybe decide who controls the House. Now, I want to mention one race in New York. Lara Sabato mentioned that New York's 19th district and also California's 13th district are listed as toss-ups, which may be surprising for some folks because they think of New York and California as being solidly blue. If we can put up the House map again, and maybe you can give us some insight, Alencia, in terms of how is it that in California and in New York, you have certain House races that really could be toss-ups and they could go either blue or red?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in states, particularly New York and California, because they have the largest cities in not only our nation, but some of the largest cities in the world that occupy them, that tend to lean heavily Democratic and blue, folks think that the majority of the state is the same way, but there are rural areas, there are more conservative areas. And to be honest, I will say this, the Republicans have done an interesting job. I will give them credit for doing a really interesting job in communicating the conversations around immigration that are actually conversations that are happening in a lot of states, but they've communicated the conversation around immigration. Now, whether or not it's true, I don't believe it's true the way that they're talking about it. It has promoted this kind of fear and it's forced voters to pay attention to an issue that they hadn't really paid attention to in the ways that we have seen in the past. And so some of these races have become competitive off of, unfortunately, what they have created as a political conversation versus finding solutions. The reality is these seats, I will say some of these seats, I will throw in there a seat here in my home state of Virginia, the 7th congressional district. Abigail stepped down and she is running for governor next year. And so that is a swing district. I will say these swing districts gave significant influence into how the top of the Democratic Party ticket was shaped out over the summer, because a lot of Democratic candidates were saying that they were having trouble when it comes to campaigning with President Biden at the top of the ticket. I do believe with Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket, there have been stronger inroads. We have seen a lot of campaigning, a lot of fundraising in those spaces, in those seats. And so it will be interesting to watch those as we see the exit polling come out tomorrow night.
Alencia Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. Final comments, election eve, what do you want to leave folks with?
I want folks to stop paying attention to the polls right now and actually go exercise their right to vote, because sometimes we see these polls and we say, oh, they've got it in the bag, or oh my God, my vote's not going to make a difference, so I don't need to show up. I actually encourage you to vote tomorrow. And if you've already voted, go phone bank for a candidate, whether the president, state legislature, or even a ballot measure that you care about, to try to get at least 2 or 3 other people to turn out and vote, because those few votes will make a difference in the election.
Alencia, thank you for joining us. And for folks who may not know this, she just released a book. If you haven't read it, please do. Thank you for joining us tonight and for all of the work that you've done to advance democracy over the past several years.
Thank you.
Great conversation. Great conversation. She really broke that down, really just like, so you could really understand it. So I love it. While people are watching, I'm going to go back to what we said before. Make sure you have a plan to vote. Text your family right now. Make sure whoever has not voted, they will be voting on tomorrow. But now we are joined, so excited. We are joined by actor, comedian, producer, philanthropist, and because it's dinner time, grilling enthusiast, Anthony Anderson.
Hey, how's everybody doing this evening?
We're good. Don't grill us though. Don't
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna. No, the only people I'm going to grill are my family members and my friends to get out and vote tomorrow. That's what I'm going to grill everybody about. You know, I will be taking my son to the polls for the first time. This is his second. This will be the second time he's voting, but this will be the first time that we will be voting together, and it's important for us. You know, back in 2016, I believe, you know, it was my daughter's first time voting. Well, we went and voted at the polling places together. So it's definitely a family affair for us.
Now, Anthony, you've been involved in getting out the word on voting for quite some time. We know you've been doing a lot of work in this election specifically to try to spread the word and energize voters about this election. What pushed you to get involved in this stage of, or in this way in terms of voting and elections?
You know, just hearing people saying that they're going to sit home and not vote this election. And I feel that's doing a disservice to democracy. I feel that's doing a disservice to the people who sacrificed their lives for us to have this privilege to vote. So that's why I'm out here. I'm not here to tell anybody which way to vote. I want you to get out there and make sure that your voice is heard by placing a vote up and down the ballot. And that's what's most important for me.
You know, we've been talking a lot about why voting is important. The conversation of which way Black men will lean has been this ongoing conversation. But for you, when you look at what is at stake, and even the conversations you even had with your children, how would you answer that? For you, what is at stake in this season?
The future of democracy, the future and how you're going to be living your life under what rules and what leadership. You know, that's the conversations I've been having with my son and with the youth of today who are saying, you know, voting isn't important to me. And I was like, no, it's very important. It's very important that you go out and you register to vote, you register early, and you make a plan to vote. And so that's what I've been telling everybody for the last few months. And, you know, it's come down to, you know, the eve of this big election. And so that's what it's about. It's about being heard and it's about making a difference. And you can't sit home and be apathetic about the world in which you live if you're not participating in the change of it. And so that is what I'm telling people. That's what I'm here for, and that's what I've told my children the entire time that they've been eligible to vote in these elections.
Do you have any anxiety about this election? I mean, I've spoken to so many people that are so anxious about this anxiety, and I'm so all of us are sort of managing our anxiety in some way. What would you say to folks out there who are so anxious about this election, and how do you manage your anxiety if you have any? And what would you say to them in terms of how they should be managing their anxiety this election season?
You know, I don't have any anxiety about voting myself. The anxiety I have is about people getting off the couch, getting out of their homes, and going out to make a difference, and not sitting back. It was like, well, it doesn't matter to me. Well, no, it does matter. It matters to you. It matters to your children. It matters to the future. I mean, you look at what's happening in politics right now, and how things or how people in certain parties are trying to reverse what we've accomplished in all these years. So that's the anxiety that I have. It's like, no, let's go out and let's go make a difference. Let's go vote. You know, let's go. If you need a ride, I got a ride. You know, if you need something, we're going to find whatever it is that you need. I just can't I can't say it loud enough to those of us, especially within our community, that no, this really means something to us, and we need to go out there and make a change and make a difference and vote and be on the right side of history.
Mr. Anderson said, if you need a ride, I got a ride. So you've been running Uber service this election, but that's good. That's good.
Look, right there. I got a Sprinter van. You just tell me where you need to go. I'll come pick you up
I'm
and take
just
you to your
saying,
polling place
you
if that's
know,
what you need me to do.
Is it fully stocked? But we get in it. You know what I'm saying? But no, I've been watching you a lot on a lot of platforms that you've been talking about. So first of all, thank you for using the platform that you have to speak up and to speak very loudly and very intentionally. Before you leave us, though, what is one last message that you have? Because while people are going to go out and vote tomorrow, there's even work to do the next day. We cannot just sit on our laurels and just wait for things to happen. What is your message to Americans?
Well, my message is my message is that don't only sit around and vote every 4 years. You know, when that happens, you have to vote up and down the ticket, but you also have to vote at your local elections. You know, you always say, or I always hear people say, well, it doesn't do anything for me or my community. That's because you're not voting and you're not in your community. You're not voting for your mayors. You're not voting for your aldermen. You're not voting for your councilmen and councilwomen. That's what you need to do. You need to vote for your superintendent. Your school superintendent. You need to vote for things that are going to affect you in your community. And so that's what I want to tell people. Don't sit down and wait every 4 years and just vote at the top of the ticket. Vote every election in your community and vote every 4 years up and down the ballot. That's what I emphasize and I tell people all the time.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Anderson.
you, Anthony.
No problem.
Anderson.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for carving out time in your busy schedule to join us tonight. Thank you so much.
It's my responsibility. It's what I'm supposed to do.
I know that's right.
Anthony Anderson carving out some time during his busy schedule to join us tonight. And I mean, as you mentioned, Ebony, we've seen him do this work for so many years. And he's now talking about it through the lens of his kids because, you know, we've had an entire session on young voters and the importance of making sure that folks who have been around a while take on that responsibility to educate young voters about this election and what's important. And we will have some other folks during this town hall talk about the importance of engaging with young voters, but just amplifying again how important it is that Anthony Anderson has been doing this work for so long and continues to do this work.
I love it. You know, Alfonso, we've been talking a lot also about voting early. So I didn't keep my promise. I didn't vote early. So
No?
I know. Maybe I should have even admitted that on Paint the Polls Black.
No,
But
Ebony, I mean, what are you doing?
I'm going in the morning. I'm going early in the morning, and I'm taking my niece with me. So I'm making it a family affair. I'm making it that face was not, you did not look happy with me. But I am going in the morning. I am going.
So
but most of my family voted early.
I voted early.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an incredible experience because I voted early for many, many election cycles, but this election cycle seemed somewhat different. I mean, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon and there was a long line and people had to go back to work and they were saying, I'm staying out here. I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote early. I want to make sure that I'm not experiencing the longer lines that I think folks may experience tomorrow. And that's something that I think we need to highlight for folks. If you haven't voted early, just understand that you may confront long lines tomorrow.
Yeah.
And when you confront those long lines tomorrow, it's really easy just to say, I don't have the time. I
Right.
need to go and do something else. But we want to make sure that to the extent you confront those long lines, please stand in line and exercise your right to vote.
Now, I will not be moving. I will not be moved. I will be standing in that line. I'm taking the little one with me. We've been talking politics all week long, and she's only 10 years old. And she's got a lot of questions, and she's excited about going into that booth with me tomorrow. So I'm excited. I've heard a lot of
Good.
things that have been happening at certain polls, but I'm excited.
Good, good. So we're now going to turn into our next guest, from the talented actor that you just heard from, Anthony Anderson, to a lifelong advocate for justice. Joining us now to talk about her on-the-ground work this election season, Tamika Mallory, who's an author and the leader of the 2017 Women's March. Tamika, I know that we all know that you have been doing this work for a long time. We know that you have a lot going on tonight, and you carved out some time out of your schedule to join us. So thank you for joining us.
Hi, Ebony and Alfonso. Love you all.
Thank you. So we've seen a record number of people, Tamika, participate in this electoral process. As we mentioned, I voted early. Ebony's going to be voting tomorrow, but we'll put that aside for a second.
Ebony.
We'll put that aside for a second. Did you decide to vote early in this election? And if you did, what was your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I voted early. Usually, which is why I don't know what Ebony was thinking about. Because
But I'm going to vote. I am voting. I've never missed.
I get it, but like, why put yourself through the last day? There are some people, though. I was knocking on doors on Saturday in Philadelphia, and people said, election day is my thing. Like, I don't go early. That's not my whole family. We go together. We make a thing of getting up early in the morning and going on election day. So for some folks, that's the thing. But it wasn't Ebony's thing. She just was working too much. She was working too much, and she procrastinated all the way until
You know what?
the
That is
line.
not what we're supposed to be talking about.
No, love to you, sis. I know you're gonna get it done. But my experience was interesting, because generally when I go to early vote, because I do so in almost every election, I'm always in a different state on election day, especially when there are super, important national races happening. But in this particular time, when I went back to New York and I voted early, the polling site was a little crowded. Usually when I go, it's not that way. It's just like me and maybe one other person, and the little ladies who work the polls. Many of them know me because they've been seeing me for so long, and they want to take pictures and smile and laugh and talk and do all that. They didn't have time for that. They were like, hey, how you doing? They were down in the papers and making sure people think they were dealing with inquiries and issues. So that was a good sign. And the other thing is, as I was walking out, people know me. I have a pretty recognizable face, and so as I was walking out, there were women coming in like, I'm going in here to handle it right now. So there was like a whole thing, an unspoken, we got business to take care of, and I'm here today just like you are to make sure that it happens.
For let me ask you about, for those who are still on the fence, and I've heard people saying you can't be, there's no way you're on the fence still about who it is, but on the fence about voting, what is your message to them? Why should they use voting as a method to help get their voices heard?
Well, I think if you're still looking for your funny Valentine or your sweet date or somebody who you can, take to prom or take home to mom and dad, you're looking for the wrong thing. I think that if that's what's holding you up, that you're still trying to like the candidate so much that it gives you some, a level of excitement to the point that you're running to the polls, that's probably not going to happen in the next few hours. And it may never happen at all in with these particular candidates in mind. But what we should be looking for are people who we feel like some of at least the majority of our value system is shared with this individual and with the group of people who will be working on issues alongside this person, with a party that aligns with your value system, that you don't feel like your entire moral compass is being violated, is being in many ways sort of crushed, right? Because there are people out here that certain things, if you got two or more issues that you're like, I literally, this impacts my moral fiber, that's a problem. But when you can look at someone and say, well, I got these 2 or 3 issues, but I have 10 that I think you and I are more aligned on, then you've got to make the decision to go with that individual. And there's not a lot of time at this point to continue to deliberate that. Maybe you will all the way to the polls, but you can't not show up. You can't not get there. I mean, when I walked in, I'll be honest with you, I was so caught up in this idea that I'm going to defeat Donald Trump. That's me saying that. I don't know exactly where we stand, C4, C3, nonpartisan or not on this program, but I'm saying that was my mindset when I went to the polls. And so I was so caught up in that, I forgot to read the ballot in advance to, figure out all the other things, the propositions on the back of the ballot. I forgot. And so when I got there and I read it, it took me longer to vote than usual, because usually I got a little paper in my hand. I know exactly what I'm going to do. But this time I had to actually think. I forgot about the fact that there was going to be about 5 different judges. 2 of them, thankfully, I knew their names. But if I didn't know them, I would have really been stunned. And then the propositions, I knew a few of the issues, so I was able to kind of move through it. But I had to read deeply there at the polling location, which I usually don't do. And so I'm saying that to say, if you're undecided, just know that you have to show up, because there are other people on the ballot outside of the presidential candidates that we need to ensure we weigh in, so that we have the ability to move things on a local level. So I hope that no one sits at home because they're not feeling like their funny Valentine is up for election. That's probably not going to happen. It's probably not going to be your situation, but you still have a responsibility to get to the polls. And I'll say this is the last thing on that. We have to have someone who we believe we can at least fight. Right. There's one side of the coin, in my opinion, that you can't even have audience with them. You can't talk to them. You don't have a person like Alfonso David, who will more than likely, if you're not in an administration, at least be close enough to make phone calls when there are problems. You have no one that you can talk to with one group of individuals. And on the other side, how I made my decision is, I know when I'm ready to protest against these people, at least they know my name. At least they respect me enough that I can get a meeting afterwards, because I'm definitely going to be protesting whoever the next president is, and I might protest more if the person looks like me.
Okay,
Wow.
you just dropped a bunch of gems there, Tamika. And I think I just want to draw out 2 strands. One, for folks, if you're going to be voting tomorrow, you can actually get information about who is on the ballot tonight. You can do your research before you show up. You can go to vote.org. You can get all of that information, so that you're not standing voting and then getting all of that information or trying to process it for the first time. That's incredibly important, and I want to make sure. And the second point that I think you made is very, very important, which is, we may not agree with all of the issues that either candidate is advancing, but if you don't have an audience with one and you have an audience with another, you actually have an ability to affect change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to fight no matter what, but I need to have an opponent that I can at least reason with, right? I don't want to be out there fighting with somebody that I know their intention ultimately will be to silence me.
Oh no.
Oh,
Let's
no.
see. We'll wait to see
Oh,
if she
we
comes
just lost
back.
Tamika.
But
She will hopefully come back.
I
We have
am
one
glad
last
that
question for her. Um,
I am glad that you brought her, or that you piggybacked off of what she said on looking at your ballot ahead of time. It's is so important. I did do that. It's so important. Y'all not gonna kill me today. I did do that. And here's why, because I don't think sometimes the way, and there's been an issue with this, the way certain referendums are worded. You
Mhm.
may be thinking you're voting one way and you're actually voting another way. And they found that in various states. So make sure you know what is on the ballot. Make sure you, even if you have to look up certain stories or news stories to really break it down, what that really means. And the judges, when she brought up the judges, I'm telling you, the judicial system is on the ballot, and it's so important that you know what judges that you are voting for, because that's going to make one of the biggest differences in your area as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I got cut off. I'm actually doing this from a van that is our production studio. We're outside. We're in Detroit. Today we hosted a bunch of stuff. I mean, yesterday we got to Detroit and traveled straight to Saginaw, Michigan, where if we are able to close the gap there, we can actually move the needle in terms of people who show up just to vote in general. Lots of Black folks in Saginaw who are untouched. They have not been talked to. We're not doing partisan work, but we are at least able to get people to get up and get to the polls. And so we went to Saginaw yesterday. Some of our folks went back today. And then we hosted for the students of Wayne State. On yesterday, they had a mini conference. And on today, we had a concert for them where we allowed them to bring in artists that they wanted from the Detroit area and other places. And now we're hosting an after party for them. We partnered with them. We let them make the plan, do all the things on their own. And the only thing they need to do to pay us back is to, first of all, vote tomorrow, and also to bring other young people with them from their campus and from the surrounding area to show up to the polls. So I'm actually sitting outside in a production van with Pastor Michael McBride, who's one of the greatest
Yes.
organizers in the country.
Hey, Pastor
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Pastor Mike. Thank you. Thank you. Tamika, thank you for joining us. We have one last question for you before we move on. A lot of folks out there, and we talked about folks who may ultimately decide not to vote, but you also have another cluster of folks who may decide not to vote as a form of protest.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about how you engage with those who are thinking about not voting and they think not voting is a legitimate form of protest.
Yeah. Well, let me start off by saying that there are people who are very concerned about an issue like what is happening to the Palestinian people. And I support and understand. And I get that some folks just feel like they cannot bring themselves to vote for a candidate who has at least been a bystander in a situation where genocide is what is happening. That is our 100% feeling about what is taking place in Gaza and around Gaza, like places like the West Bank and other places in that region. And so there are folks that are out there. I have my Arab brothers and sisters, my Muslim brothers and sisters who have said under no circumstance can they vote for this administration. Some of them are not even feeling that they should be voting at all. And I can tell you that I don't argue with them and tell them that they're wrong, because they are literally watching their loved ones be blown to smithereens in front of their faces, whether it be on camera or conversation, knowing about things that's happening to their family members. They are literally Arab Americans and other Muslim Americans who are dying from heartbreak of what is happening. We've been hearing a lot about that since we've been in Michigan, which is a state where a lot of Arabs and Muslims live. And so I don't argue with them. I just, I try to have those conversations and to encourage them to understand that we will not leave them, that we will continue to stand by them and continue to fight alongside them to see a ceasefire. But we're at the point beyond even that. And so an arms embargo is what we are now fighting for. And I believe that we should all be engaged in that. And so I want to put that there. I think that, however, there have been a number of folks who have said to me, how dare you? How can you vote for a candidate who has been engaged in this? And while Vice President Harris has said that she wants to see a ceasefire and she wants to see an immediate end to the war on the people of Gaza, at this, and she actually said she wants to see an end to the war. So let me not put words in her mouth. But while she has said that, she's also said that she will not change the conditions for which the relationship between America and Israel exists. And that for us is very problematic. And again, it has marginalized a lot of folks. Now, those individuals and some others have said, how can you support that? How can you be a part of it? It's hypocritical. It's all these things. It's there's a big conflict there. And I don't argue with them either, other than to say that yes, there's the genocidal maniac in Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, but there's also another genocidal maniac that will impact the lives of Black people here where I work, live, and have to survive and breathe every single day of my life. From 2015, when Donald Trump was running for president, all the way until the day he left, and there is still the residual effects of him being president. I have my own personal life has been in danger more than ever before, and I've been in this movement for 30 years. I was targeted. I have had police officers targeting me. I have been listed on some of the Black identity extremist list that was out there to identify those of us who they would consider the enemy within, which is some of the language and the rhetoric that we're hearing today. When we were in Kentucky fighting for Breonna Taylor, the surveillance, the drones over my house, Black helicopters flying over us, and then the ways in which we were addressed by normal citizens who we've encountered regular, folks who are white supremacists in their mind or whatever you want to call them. We've dealt with that for a long time, but the vitriol and the way in which they approached us after Donald Trump was president, it was a different feeling. And if you don't know that, I'm sorry to tell you that unfortunately, I cannot allow him to be president, not because of an issue. You could say he's fine for you, but he don't work for me personally. I could be sitting here telling you, well, he doesn't work for Black men, or he's a danger to the immigrant population, or he's an immigrant to this community. All of that's cool. I'm talking about Tamika Danielle Mallory. What I experienced under a Donald Trump presidency was something that I would never, ever want to experience again. There were people who believed that because he had been president, he put a target on our backs, that they were therefore emboldened to mistreat and to really cause violence to happen towards us while we were out there in those streets. So I personally cannot support a Donald Trump presidency, but I also can't sit at home. I can't vote third party. I would love to. I love Cornel West. He is a fighter that's been alongside me for a long time, and I've been with him. He has taught me. He's been a teacher, a motivator, a teacher to so many of us in this movement. And I love Cornel West. I would love to see him be president. But I know that if I vote for Cornel West in this moment, especially if I lived in a swing state, I would ultimately be helping Donald Trump become president. So I know that it's hard for people to understand, but there's genocide over there, and then there's also genocide over here. My Black son, who just called me because he's in the airport headed to New York so that he can vote tomorrow, he's calling me, and which is actually what cut me off on this call a few moments ago. When I look at him, I know that he is a number one target for Donald Trump presidency. I understand that as a Black young man, he's exactly who they want. They have, juice in their mouth for my son to go to prison, to be dead, to be incarcerated, for him to be killed from either his own and or someone else. And I know that I only have a very small window to be able to fight for and to save him and my 2-year-old granddaughter, who I want to have more rights in her lifetime than what I had. I don't want her to have less than even what my mother has fought to ensure that we have. And so I have no choice but to show up and make sure that I'm protesting too. There's some people that's protesting by not voting. There's some people that's protesting by voting third party. I'm protesting because I'm voting against Donald Trump.
Tamika Mallory. Tamika Mallory. Okay.
Thank you,
That
sis.
was a
Thank you.
sermon. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your passion. Thank you for your advocacy. I know you had a lot going on tonight. Thank you for carving out some time to join us.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I love y'all. I hope to see you again for this conversation on the other side, because I think what will help people feel a little bit better about participating is knowing that we are willing to contribute and to be a part of the November 6th dialogue. What takes place after this election, and how are we going to continue to bring the issues? Because the issues that Black men and others have been raising, it's not that those issues are wrong. It's that we have to have a different strategy for how we're going to address it than to throw this election. But I want to be in the trenches with our family members who are out here saying, I want more health care. I want better housing. I want equal opportunities. I want to be in the trenches with you. And so I look forward to the November 6th conversation.
And we will be calling you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you,
Thanks,
sis.
Mika. Okay. Yes.
I love it.
So
love
that leads us right into the next conversation with some special guests. So I'll turn it over to you, Ebony, to lead us into that conversation.
Yes. This has been so good. Let me just say that all of the Paint the Polls Black sessions. But if you have turned on the news at all this election season, there's been endless coverage about whether Black men will vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And joining us to break down where the truth exists within the media frenzy are Jeff Johnson and Ryan Wilson and Hill Harper. Jeff Johnson is a social architect and storyteller. He's had a diverse career as a journalist, producer, TV host. I remember him when he was at the NAACP, as well as I go that far back, as well as successfully running a strategic communications firm. Ryan Wilson is the co-founder and CEO of TGS Holdings, a consumer lifestyle and hospitality company based in Atlanta, Georgia. And Hill Harper is the famous actor and importantly, a politician. He is known for his roles as Dr. Sheldon Hawks in CSI New York, Agent Spellman Boyle in Limitless, and Dr. Marcus Andrews in The Good Doctor. He was a candidate in the Democratic primary in 2024 and the Senate election in Michigan to fill the seat of retiring incumbent Senator Debbie Stabenow. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a lot of conversations in the media around Black men. I'm sure you have, because I've seen all y'all on panels talking about it. But moving to the Republican Party under Donald Trump, where do you think the truth lies within this divisive narrative that really lacks true polling, honestly?
And we'll just open that up unless anyone wants to take it. But I know Jeff is probably chomping at the bit. So Jeff, maybe we'll have you.
No, well, hey, Alfonso and Ebony, and listen, I know I don't even need to talk when my brothers Hill and Ryan are on. I would just say this. I think for many of us don't realize that Black men are the least polled demographic in the United States of America. And so I've been really pleased with my brother, Terrence Woodbury at Hit Strategies, who's now working on the campaign. They have done more work around polling Black men around this election than anybody else. And so I think, one, I've been a little bit disturbed with a narrow and unsophisticated narrative. There have been Black men that have considered voting for Trump for one of a number of reasons. I think there are far more Black men that are trying to decide whether they don't want to vote at all because they don't trust either party or the political system. But I think they're considering, do I vote at all or do I vote for Kamala Harris? And so I just wanted to be a little bit more sophisticated in how we assess where Black men are. I've also heard without fail this narrative that Black men don't want to support women leadership. And again, I think that there are Black men that are narcissists. I think there are Black men that are misogynists. I think there are Black men that are sexist. I think by and large, Black men who have initially had questions about Kamala Harris just didn't have a relationship with her. We got to be honest about the fact that the Democrats did an unbelievable, terrible job when she was first brought on to run with President Biden about not giving her the freedom to tell her story. And it's not as if over the last 4 years, there's been a concentrated effort for her to tell her story. So there are a lot of Black men that only knew her as a prosecutor, but didn't know facts connected to that, and have been bombarded with misinformation from many sectors. And so I think in the last 90 days, we've seen a great job, both by the campaign, but in large part by, I think, a lot of grassroots organizations of men who know her better, who have been able to tell some accurate stories. And even if brothers have not decided to vote for her, I think we've given a lot of men the opportunity to have facts versus fiction and misinformation in their decision of how and who to vote for.
Mm.
So, Hill, you obviously one of the few folks that have had the opportunity to run for political office. And obviously, you're a Black man. You have been in the political process. You have been on television and continues to be on television, operating in that sphere. Talk to us about your perspective. Jeff certainly gave us his view on this question of Black men and Kamala Harris.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Jeff and Ryan are two of the smartest brothers I know, and the lie to me that's perpetrated about Black men. We understand that the lies that get perpetrated and permeated throughout, not just about voting, but about criminality, about relationships with their children, all down the line. I mean, the data shows that Black men, as a Black father myself, Jeff is an amazing father, we spend more time with our kids than other demographics, yet the narrative is that we spend less. So, the fact is there are not a lot of brothers out there that I know that are planning to vote for Trump. Now, Jeff is absolutely right. Brothers got sold hope and change. Nothing changed. Then they got sold Make America Great Again, and America got worse. So what do? You say I guess it doesn't matter. If I don't have a super PAC, if I don't have, if I can't stroke a big check, maybe I'm not actually going to be represented. So why should I participate? And so it's more of that question that Jeff just pointed out. There are people who are voters and they're going to vote, and those folks are going to vote for Kamala Harris. There are people that are not voters because they've completely checked out of the process, and they're not going to vote. And then there are people who are kind of like, maybe I will. And that's why conversations like this and the one I got to jump to in a second, it's a much more grassrootsy type of outreach that I got to jump into is important, because there are some voters out there that, like, if you just nudge them a little bit more, damn it, I'm okay, I'm gonna go, and they're going to cast a vote for Kamala Harris. You got to remember also, even when we're talking about women's reproductive freedom in Michigan, Black men voted in favor of women's reproductive freedom to codify that in our state at the same rate as Black women. And so we vote quite similarly in our community. It's just about turnout and showing that there's a reason. Now, what I've been saying to folks is something that Tamika said. We can't make the same mistake that we made in 2008, which was the goal is the victory and everyone is happy. It has to be, the goal is to win, sure, but as soon as that person is sitting, as soon as President Harris is sitting at that table, there are asks and accountability that goes along with it. I think that I've known Vice President Harris for 15 years. I think that she's very different. You're going to see a presidency that is not going to be talking about no new friends. You're going to see a presidency that's not going to be very insular. You're going to see a presidency that I think if, now this is a big if, what I'm about to say, if for some reason we can capture the House and the Senate, that'll be a very aggressive first 2 years, unlike the Obama years. So there's a lot of learning that's happened, and I think that all of us have to stay there, meaning all the rallies, everything that we've done, I believe Vice President Harris is going to win tomorrow. So everything that we've done to create that victory, that same energy needs to continue, because the power is in the collective, not in the person. And that's what we have to remember. It's not just about getting someone elected. It's about staying engaged to make sure that the receipts are paid. And they have to be paid, because too much has been said. I mean, even comments about giving $25,000 for first home buyer down payments in our community. That changes Detroit, because you know what? In many communities in Detroit, you can buy a whole house for $25,000. It's not even a down payment, right? So that changes lives. But we have to hold them accountable to that. So with that, I'm going to listen in a little long, but I have to jump to this other one. And if I can jump back in, I will.
Well, Hill, before you drop, and Ryan, we have a question for you, the similar question, but Hill, before you drop, just in case you may not have the ability to get back in, is there any message that you want to send out to the thousands of people that are going to be watching this, either tonight or tomorrow on election day, just to make sure you have the last word before you have to drop off?
Listen, this is it when it comes to your ability to impact the future of this country. And that comes through a vote. And just looking at the scope of history, you cannot tell me, I know it moves slow. I know it moves slow and deliberate, but you cannot tell me progress has not been made, right? So we are on the precipice and have an opportunity to elect the first female president, as well as the first Black female president in the history of this country, when Black women only have had the right to vote less than 100 years. I mean, it's amazing, right? So progress is happening, even though it seems it's so slow. It's like my son, he keeps growing, but I can't tell he's growing day to day, but I know over time he's growing. We have an opportunity for true growth. Do not sit this one out. Don't sit it out. You may not have gotten what you wanted before. You may not get exactly what you want in the future, but know this, sitting it out is a vote for Donald Trump. And if that's the future you want to have, then I don't know what to say. But I do know that you'll have an opportunity with a president that all of us on this Zoom, would be able to reach and make suggestions and try to hold accountable. That will not happen in a President Trump presidency. We will not be able to have those same conversations. So just for that very fact of being able to have the audience, don't sit it out. We need you.
Thank you, Hill. Thank you for joining us. Ryan, same question to you. You are the co-founder of The Gathering Spot. Folks may not know, it's in Atlanta and Washington, D.C. It's a private venue where we folks of a certain viewpoint, if you will, I'll just frame it that way, gather. An opportunity to sort of engage with folks at The Gathering Spot. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing on the ground, and to Jeff's point about Black men and the perceptions of our engagement or lack thereof for the election.
Well, folks are excited, right? First and foremost, we have been working. I mean, we've left it all on the field. There's no way to describe the effort over the last couple of weeks. I mean, everything has been exhausted. To this conversation, though, about Black men, I'm super excited that tomorrow is election day so that we can put this conversation to rest. Black men are going to show up the same way that they always have, right? And I think it's important for us to acknowledge, yes, there are a number of issues that Black men have identified in this election that are important to them. But the thing that's interesting is that those are the same issues that everyone across the electorate has identified are also important. Things like the economy, right? So I'm not worried at all. I can't wait to retire the overall discussion. If you look at where there have been weak points, right? I live in Atlanta. The demographic that we need to be spending the most time talking to are white women, right? So if all the energy that has been directed at Black men in terms of where are we going to show up, we're the second largest voting bloc behind Black women, right? If this election is going to be won or lost, it is not going to be because Black men sit it out. And again, I'm glad that we're having this conversation the day before election day so that we can look at some data here in a couple of days and see that this was a conversation that in some ways, I guess, was justified and important from an agenda setting perspective, but certainly not because there should be a real concern. So we're on the way. We've been organizing. Let's follow the numbers here in a second.
I'm glad you made that point. I promise you, as a member of the media, I ain't never heard people talk about Black men so much. And I just hope that after tomorrow, they keep talking about Black men, but from a different perspective. It's actually kind of anchored and bothered me. I'm like, y'all ain't never been worried about Black men until now.
I actually am glad. I agree with both of you by way of how dare you question whether or not we'd be engaged. But because we have the lowest life expectancy of any group in America, because we are the least polled group of anybody in America, because I have never seen an elected official ever of any race put out an agenda specifically around Black men and include not just money and politics, but mental health. And I don't know if those things would have happened if this hadn't been raised as a concern. And frankly, and Ryan and I have talked about this all the time, if we weren't honest about the fact that the Democratic Party just hasn't done their job. And so there is a real opportunity here because there are groups of men that are saying, I don't trust either party and I need somebody to earn my vote. And so I think that this has elevated, to Ryan's point, a conversation that needs to begin happening on November 6th, November 7th, 8th, or 9th, whenever we find out who the president is. But I think it's raised conversation that, frankly, we weren't having, despite the fact that there's been some level of offense in the myopic way that we have been viewed in the process of that conversation.
When we look at this election, what are some of the largest issues that you see concerning the community, and how do you see both of the presidential campaigns addressing them?
I think it gets back to the economy, right? And especially as it relates to Black men. But again, this is another area where we have an opportunity to draw a clear contrast. President Trump has not put meaningful policy on the table as it relates basically to anybody, but certainly to Black men. And here we have, to Jeff's point, a vice president that has a very specific policy proposal for Black men that's on the table, right? So the contrast is extraordinarily clear. But as I'm talking to folks inside of our community, they are interested in trying to figure out how they're going to grow and scale their companies. They were interested in how they're going to be able to take care of their families. They're interested in trying to make sure that this America that we've dreamed of, just from a process standpoint, exists for them too. The thing, again, that we have to continue to point out is that is not actually that interesting. Those are the same issues that a lot of different folks are talking about, but we haven't had specific policy proposals for. We have one now. We do not have one on the other side of this conversation with the former president. I hope as folks are casting their ballot tomorrow that they keep that in mind, because we really only have one choice in this election. And I agree with Jeff that the thing that we need to be paying the most attention to is once we get past Election Day, the work that starts the very next day. We're going to have to deliver on these promises. We cannot be here in 4 years trying to reheat this discussion. Folks are going to have to see us consistently engaging and getting accomplished the things that we said that we wanted to do, making sure that those things happen. And when they do, I think we'll be able to finally, hopefully, retire this overall conversation for good, because we're a voting bloc that's going to continue to show up and vote our interests.
Jeff, same question to you. I do want to hop in really quickly, though, and say, for those who were saying that they did not see her, what was she doing? She was working on this, had been working on this plan before. And I'll put some of this on media because as a White House reporter, she has had a vigorous schedule doing tours and economic tours for a while, going to college campuses and touring. But you did not see many of those outlets covering that at all. And so go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Ebony, we're also talking about a presidential candidate that had 90 days versus a year and a half.
Exactly.
And so let's just be honest. I mean, while Vice President Harris was a part of a Biden-Harris ticket, it is not the same as a Harris ticket. And so I have been amazed at how much work has been done in 90 days. To almost make it feel like she's been campaigning for a year and a half. I think that the issues that Ryan lay out are clear. I think some of the things that have had to happen also are just some level setting about the truth. That no, as a Black man, as an American, you did not get a check from President Trump. Yes, he put his name on it, but no, that money did not come from him. That was from Congress. He held up that check so that he could put his name on it. It was a brilliant marketing move, but it's not accurate. That when you start talking about, I hear Black men on a regular basis saying, I'm considering Trump because I get to keep more of my money. Well, if we talk about the 2017 tax cuts, if those are extended, that you're not even talking about wealthy white people that benefit from that. You're only talking about super rich people. And then when you start talking about tariffs, because we're all about Americans, well, those tariffs create a burden on small entrepreneurs who the only reason they're able in some cases to sell their t-shirts or sell their bags or do some of the business they do is because they're able to get cheaper costs sometimes from international providers. And so we have to level set some truth in addition to talking about what the Harris ticket is doing. Because frankly, again, if you're a person that doesn't trust either party, I'm not going to win you over by selling you on one or the other. I'm going to help level set by telling you what the truth is.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just quickly to that point, right? Like, folks are entitled to their own feelings, but not their own facts. The vice president has been committed to these issues throughout the entire time she's been in office, right? Yes. So the second day that she was in office, she had a meeting with small business owners talking about the economy and what things they could get accomplished. There have been numerous summits and like conversations that have happened throughout the years, going back to even earlier this year before she was top of ticket. She was at the gathering spot January 9th, meeting with small business owners, talking about the economy, right? So we can't have this conversation and remove the facts that have been at play for a long time. She did an economic tour talking again about these same issues before she was top of ticket. So for folks that are saying, hey, she's only started to discuss this once it was campaign season, that is just not true. I would encourage anyone that has that opinion to use any of the online sources that are available to you. You will find that she's been discussing this stuff for a very long time. That is part of the reason why we got to specific policy proposals, because the conversations she's been having with real people over a number of years help to inform what we actually have on the table right now. Again, I will draw up folks to also try to research what is the Trump plan for any of the issues that we're talking about right now. It doesn't exist. Donald Trump has done nothing but insult us as a community now for decades, and especially during this campaign season. And again, I don't know what folks are missing, but the contrast is incredibly clear. We have to go and make sure that we get something done tomorrow and make sure that VP Harris is elected.
I love it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you
Ebony, before we go, just really quickly, for those that still are on this, are deciding not between two candidates, but whether they vote or not, there's just a couple things we know are going to happen. Somebody is going to win, and they are going to spend money. They are going to see policy passed. They're going to appoint judges. And you need to determine, do you want a say in that? Or do you want somebody else deciding that for? I don't care I don't care if you like them. I don't care if you want to I don't care if you're excited about them. Somebody is going to win. They're going to see that legislation is passed. They're going to spend money and they're going to appoint judges. And the other piece that Tamika talked about is there's members of the Senate, there's members of the Congress, there's judges at the local level, there's ballot initiatives, all that are on the ballot. And so while not voting may seem like a protest to you, to me, it seems like a cop-out. Because do you want say in what the future of an imperfect system is? Or do you want to claim that because it's imperfect, you won't participate? I don't think that makes sense. I don't think you believe that makes sense. I don't think the people that are relying on you to provide a level of leadership, whether it's in your home or in your community, think that makes sense. And so staying home as a protest is your right, but does it make sense for all of the things that are going to impact your life that are on that ballot when you show up tomorrow?
Jeff Johnson, Ryan Wilson, thank you so much for all of the work that you all have done across this election season. And we want to really thank you for joining us tonight. We know that you had to move some things around. So thank you both for joining us.
No, thank you for the opportunity, and y'all are doing a great job at y'all black job. Like, I'll just say, like, the great black jobbing right now. See y'all later.
I second.
What? I love us.
Thanks you all.
I love us.
Thank you. And so we're closing out our final Paint the Polls Black before the election. We have some final guests tonight. 2 young leaders who are using their platforms to educate voters. Lene Vinay, who is a 3-time NAACP Image Award nominee, a BET Culture Class of 2024, a social media phenom, and the founder of the Good People Project. We also have Joshua Joseph, who is a political content creator, and his viral videos have helped to educate the next generation of change makers. Joshua is also a part of the Good People Project. For the record, Lene is returning to us. She joined us a few weeks ago on Paint the Polls, and she's joining us again. So thank you so much, Lene, Vinay, for joining us. Joshua, thank you for joining us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having us.
Thank you for having
How are
me.
you all doing?
Good. Excited for tomorrow. We're feeling good. Yeah.
Good.
Nervous.
Nervous?
I was like, talk about the anxiety. I know I'm not the only one with anxiety.
I don't know. I feel something in me. I wanted to get up here and do my little, hee hee ha ha. I'm scared, but I have a lot of faith. In the work that we've been doing to get people the information. I'm sorry, there are sirens coming down my street. I don't know if you can hear them, but the work that we've been doing to get the people information. Myself and JJ, we do this for a living. We've been doing this, before VP Harris was at the top of the ticket, before a lot of the world events took place that got people galvanized in a different way and moved in a different way. But the way that it seems like almost every resource in the community has geared itself up to protect this top of ticket candidate and protect the information surrounding and protect community and making sure that they have all the tools that they need to make informed decisions. That makes me excited. That makes me hopeful. That makes me faithful. So my butterflies are going, but I feel so grounded in this moment. It feels like history is about to be made for sure.
So Lene, let's dig into that a little bit more. You have a phenomenal initiative called the Good People Project. Talk to folks about what that project is, why you started it, and what you hope to achieve.
For sure. So before VP Harris was at the top of the ticket, and when the attacks on Gaza were really moving people in the ways that they should have, like people who are interested in freedom for Black folks and freedom for everybody, it caused a lot of conversation and necessary conversation. And what I started to see a lot of was people wishing to divest from this election season completely. And that scared me because in this era, we've not yet been able to collectively come together and organize strategically and exercise our vote in a manner fully and completely to get the results that we need. And hearing Hill Harper and Ryan and all the guys talking earlier, it makes so much sense. One, yes, we've had someone who's had a 1.5-year campaign versus someone who has a 90-day campaign. But also we have a lot of people who are disappointed with being sold hope, disappointed with the Make America Great, whatever, obviously, and just not feeling like their vote matters at all. But in reality, we've not really been voting as extensively as we need to vote to make sure the things that we're hearing people talk about and promise us when it comes to election season and all the things that they're giving to different communities, we're not making sure there are people in the room to make sure that stuff trickles down from the top. And so what I felt like we needed more of was education. And so the Good People Project, someone else has that name, but it is my project. And I've developed 2 organizations, one being the Good People Collective, which is the C3. That's all about education. It is civics class, because we need civics class. Because if I hear another time what VP Harris hasn't already done, she's been the vice president. People do not know what a vice president does. And it's no shame. I think it's intentional. Our education system doesn't put enough emphasis and clarity around the way government works so that people can have an accurate understanding as they're going to the voting booths. On the other side, we have the Good People Party, and that is where we endorse specific candidates that align with our interests and with our agreements. And if I'm being completely transparent, studying the Project 2025 gave me the crux of the idea for the framework for the Good People Party, because what I noted is that no matter what folks on that side may believe, they know what to do when it's time to vote. They know what to agree on when it's time to get things done in policy and legislation. And so we have to have things that we agree on. We are such a community that is divided based upon our individual needs and desires, based on our individual identity politics, based on whether people feel like other people or other minority groups are getting their rights before others. We got to drop a lot of those unnecessary barriers and conflicts in order to be strategic and be unified. So that's what Good People is about. It's about, one, making sure you have the information to know what you're talking about and know what you need. And on the other side, it's making sure you know who is put in place to get you there.
So Lene, where can folks find out more about the party and the work that you're doing?
You can find out about more of it on my page. You can find about it on the We Are GPP page, but we have websites built. We are a brand new organization. JJ is part of the content creator cohort. It was important for us to pull in the content creators who, like I said, have been doing this for a living far before any of this, but far before a lot of folks started paying politically minded content creators to do content, because we just thought it was right. And so we wanted to reach out to those folks who would do this on a volunteer basis. And that is the type of people that we have. We have a reach of over 12 million. Conscious Lee is a part of our cohort. He is in South Africa doing the good fight and also fighting his sleep. So he could not make it here with us today. But as I said, we're a brand new organization. So our initiatives are pretty new. We had a really cool opportunity to do a South Georgia bus tour to go to different HBCUs and engage with Black-owned businesses and citizens in areas that don't get all the flash and funfair and rallies that come to the metropolitan areas. And that was a really beautiful thing. So you'll definitely be hearing more about us, because also we're not just here because of a presidential election. We're here to make sure that you understand that the fight doesn't stop tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that work. And we will ask you to come back in another iteration after the election.
Okay.
So we can make sure we engage folks, because that's the key, right?
Sure.
We want to make sure that folks understand it's not just about voting for the election, it's about what do you do after? And the
Yeah.
work that you're doing definitely ties into that. So, but I know
sure.
Ebony has a few questions.
I did. You mentioned, the bus tour and the young people that you were reaching out to. What has been, if you've talked to anyone that's had voter apathy, what have you heard among young people? And was there anything that you said that could have swayed, that did sway them at all? JJ, I'll start with you and then go back to Lene.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting election cycle for me, because this is the first time I'm ever getting to vote, even though I've been making political content on the internet since I was like 16, 15. So it's been feeling like a lot of trying to advocate for different stuff. But the thing is, you oftentimes don't get to see the direct impact that it has on like people around you. Like I'll get a lot of like messages, and I understand that a lot of people like watch my content and they value it, but it's a different thing when you get to like speak to people like who I went to school with, who I grew up with, and have a direct influence on whether or not they're going to vote. I know I currently live with two of my closest friends who have also never voted, mainly because we just became of age to do so, but also because they didn't really feel invested in politics, and they got invested through me and through like the stuff that I'll talk about. So that obviously means a lot. But a lot of the big broader conversation that I see, especially with my generation, when it comes to voter apathy, is like acknowledging that the scope of our issues is very massive, and that there's blame on all types of different sides, where it's not like one side of our duopoly in the United States is all good and the other side is bad. It's a lot more nuanced than that. The conversation is a lot more nuanced. So I feel like a lot of people, especially when it comes to what's happening in Gaza and other like crises around the world, a lot of people, especially my generation, are very eager to be like, okay, we're not going to participate in this, because I think it's a benefit of my generation that we tend to be very like ambitious and bullish in the stuff that we want to change and the systems that we want to break down to restructure them and change them. But there also needs to be a strategic lens that we come about that from. And it's been trying to convey that to people, especially in my generation, that has been like pretty difficult. But I feel like I've been making decent inroads and acknowledging that, like, yes, the Democrats are not the best for the job that we have to do, especially to undo a lot of the systemic like oppression and barriers and stuff that have been built throughout the founding of America. But also we have to acknowledge that when there's a critical threat that will put everything on the back burner just to be able to, like survive from a day to day, that critical threat being a Donald Trump or a further decline into fascism, that is something that we need to also be able to adjust to. And it's not like it's like even, but one side is really bad. It's like, no, we have to actually sit down and discuss these policy initiatives. What has been accomplished? What can be accomplished? And I think that conversation has led to a lot of younger people getting more invested again and turning out for this election. At least I hope. I think their early numbers look pretty good, but especially given how much work needs to be done after this election, I feel like a lot of younger people are focused on that. And hopefully a lot of us understand that there is also steps to that process. And this step, at least in my opinion, has to be getting out there and voting tomorrow.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So JJ didn't get to go on the bus tour with us. But what I witnessed, one, is a lot of kids that showed up on our stops on the bus tour were politically engaged and invested. They wanted to be there. And what was exciting, though, was them asking questions about how do I get my classmates that don't care to care? Mm-hmm. And we went through an entire exercise. I used to be a high school teacher, and so I talked to them about backwards design. I think one thing young people and people who don't feel represented by government or feel like government doesn't affect their everyday life, the thing that they have in common is that they're focused on just their personal life, their everyday sustainability. And they may not understand that that's directly connected to their voting power, but it is. And so one thing I encouraged them to do was to lead with what matters and ask questions. No one cares what you know until they know that you care. And I feel like that is one of the best ways to reach people. And it might take longer, it might involve more conversation, but it's almost like the way religion is taught. It's almost like the way Black history has been taught, which is the reason why I dedicated myself and my storytelling to bringing people in and engaging people, because it feels stuffy. It feels so far removed. But if we're leading with things like, if you got $10 million today, how would you give back to your hood? Then we get to know what they care about. Then we get to know what things like touch them emotionally and like have certain trigger points that bring out things that they feel invested in. What else did I share with them? Like determining who they feel like is their community, determining what it is exactly that they are focused on career-wise and how things might be connected to permits or how certain plans from particular candidates may invest in their goals for their future. So leading with these things, then trailing it back to a conversation around voting is typically successful. I did meet other young people that might not have been in college, but just might be young in adulthood. And what I saw from them, those who were not interested in voting, what they said is, once again, they do not feel like voting really impacts their personal life. And one person who had been previously incarcerated said he didn't even know if he could vote. And more than anything, they felt like their vote would not matter. And one thing that I keep impressing upon people that give me that sentiment, I'm not even going to tell them that they should vote. I mean, most of these folks aren't registered, but what I do say to them, for you to be incarcerated and not know if you can vote is on purpose. For you to feel, for you as a Black person, if you wanted to be able to vote in this particular area that we're in, to have this, and this be in the way of your voting, voter suppression, all of these things should be indicators that your vote is actually powerful, that your vote actually does matter, and that there would not be so much in the way of your vote if it would not be impactful if you would wield it in service to yourself. And so I think a lot of people are encouraging people who don't want to vote for your children, vote for your future, vote for people who can't vote. We have to make the vote personal. And that is going to be one of the only ways to motivate people in the beginning. But once people get into the work, then they can start voting for community. But we have to bring them in with the personal.
So let's talk about that a little bit more in terms of getting into the personal. Let's just assume you have some young people or some older folks who haven't really paid a lot of attention during this election cycle, right? They didn't watch the debates. They haven't read the policy papers. And they are now on the election eve trying to figure out who to vote for, whether to vote. What's your message to that person who may be watching this, who may watch this on YouTube tomorrow, wake up, have an opportunity to go out and vote, but they may not be deeply steeped on any specific issue, really? What's your message to those folks?
I would say this feels heady. And I think people think that we're fear mongering when we say this, but I honestly believe that our freedom of expression is at stake. Our cultural expression is at stake. When I look at the things in Project 2025 that leave up to discretion about what is moral, what is morally acceptable, what is inappropriate, talks of like sex education, queer identity, Black identity, the way we tell stories, the way we express ourselves through music, the ways, I'm a multi-hyphenate because I have different hands in different pots and doing different things, but developing TV shows that we like to watch, all these things are at stake with the threat of a government that wishes to be so deeply entrenched in our personal autonomy and the way that we creatively express ourselves. That is scary, but it's also very real and it's on paper. So what I would say to people who feel like this is an election that they don't have to take part in, I would just say that you're going to have to be sat with the result. You know, like you're going to have to, I don't know what else to say other than that. Like we're a day before the election. Our livelihood is at stake. And I don't think people take it that serious, but countries that were previously democracies and are now authoritarian are looking at us and say, I remember exactly what that looks like. They're saying that used to be us. And I think American exceptionalism and the ways in which American government and systems work to silo people off in their own world of problems makes us think that we can never get there. But that whole saying of a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere is true, because they will call you lucky for what you're experiencing in comparison to somebody else, as long as it's not that bad, until it gets to be that bad. And we're on the verge of that bad.
If I could like piggyback off of that, I think I try to take it to like an example that does affect your everyday life, or that really could, because a lot of people tend to sit on the sidelines when they feel like everything's too existential and it doesn't really affect me. And I tell this story about how I went to Florida, and on the way back I had to go through TSA, and I didn't have my full like plastic ID from my state yet because I had ordered a new one. It was in the mail. And usually TSA has like a pretty cool, like quick process. But as a result of me not having that, the TSA person decided that I was going to be sitting like in a room for 20 minutes getting questioned about every single like aspect of my background just to make sure I wasn't a threat to anything. Now take that same scenario and extrapolate that to now a police or a government that's emboldened, that doesn't respect people's rights, or police that has immunity, and a government that's looking to mass deport people. This can also be, the danger can be exacerbated depending on what racial demographic you're a part of. Now a simple incident of, hey, I'm waiting for my right ID to come in the mail can now be like livelihood and life threatening if the wrong questions are asked, if the wrong answers are given, or if they suspect you of anything, and you have somebody at the top of the ticket running for president who wants to engage in mass deportations with those same authorities. Something like that, as little as a traffic stop where you left something at home and everything, can be infinitely more dangerous once you add in the added context that the police need to get more power, we need to do mass deportations, and all types of stuff that are involved with that. So even though right now it looks like you're sitting at home, it's completely fine, something as minuscule as that can already be exacerbated to levels you can't even imagine because of a vote choice. And I feel like as Americans, our best interest should be to never see it get to that point. We already have a lot of things that we need to work on, and we have a very clear-cut example of somebody who's not willing to fix or help adjust anything in a positive manner for you or for your family's lives. So it can be very scary very quickly. Like Lene said, a lot of countries say that we were in that stage too, and now we're all the way on the authoritarian side. It happens throughout history. It's happened over and over again. And the best thing that we can do moving forward is not allow history to repeat itself. So when anyone's giving you those signs, it's a pretty good indicator that whatever you can do is very important. And that vote that you have is very important.
Wow.
Well, unfortunately, I had the personal experience of going through that because I lived in Liberia, and we lived under democracy for a very long time. And then on a fateful day in 1980, it shifted. And there was a dictatorship. and there were assassinations, and people were placed into prison, and the Constitution meant nothing. And so as we think about this election, I often tell folks this is ultimately about democracy and freedom. Because if we don't understand that core concept, it's fragile and it could be taken away from us at any moment. All of the other issues we talk about are obviously important, from the economy to reproductive justice. But if you lose the right to be free, none of that really comes into play. If you lose the ability to exercise your right in a democracy.
And I think there's something that we're dancing around. The whole idea that it could never happen to us is just untrue, and we have evidence.
Yep.
We're seeing what's happening in Congo, what's happening in Haiti, when these rival groups take over power, and gangs and violence, and women and children becoming the main victims of these tragedies, when countries are just in the throes of war. We've seen groups, nationalist groups in this country, do crazy things, nuts, that we would never in our days dream of. So imagine those groups being emboldened by a government that calls them good people.
I think, like, just sitting with that for a while, because we have seen the rollback of so many rights already that we didn't think that we would see the rollback in. We talk about even some of the polls, when people go and they vote and they look at that ballot, there are states where we're seeing slavery on the ballot, where they're going to be talking about involuntary servitude. And like I really don't think how close people really realize sometimes on how far we could actually go back, and how
and the legislation still feels like far away because it's on paper, but we still have examples of violence.
Absolutely.
And it's funny.
We laugh about it.
It's funny to mention, because like when you look at how abortion rights were stripped away, all it took was the wrong person winning an election at a very crucial point in the lives of a couple Supreme Court justices, and boom, rights are gone. A 50-year established right is taken away. And now we're in a position where more Supreme Court justices are looking to step down in the next 4 to 8 years. So we saw when they overturned Roe v. Wade, we had chatters of maybe we'll look at contraception in the Supreme Court. Maybe we'll look at interracial marriage. There are things that you don't think would ever be questioned. Like, really, they're going to bring back some sort of regulation about marrying a different race than you? We have people in this country who genuinely think that that is something that we should pursue. And if you keep giving them the keys to power, they will keep telling you exactly who they are. And when it becomes that your opposition is not able to be present because, the president with newfound immunity can now just take out people, it becomes very hard to mount a comeback.
Yes. Now the courts have given the president immunity. I think something
they're like, it's like Jenga. It's like a bunch of Jenga blocks. They're like slowly building the tower up, like right in front of your face.
Is it slow? Things are moving. That train has been moving pretty fast.
Exactly. And it's like when it all comes tumbling down, it will in spectacular fashion. And while you're fine right now, you have to always be fighting and working to make sure you will be, and people around you will be. And that's one of the biggest reasons why, if you're still guessing, you need to get out there. You need to go low.
Wow.
We want to give you both, Lene and Joshua, an opportunity to say the last word to folks. West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, wherever folks are. Tomorrow is our last chance to have a voice in this year's election. It's our last chance to have a voice in this year's election. I want to give you both an opportunity to have a closing message to the folks out there, because you may not have another opportunity to talk to them before the polls close tomorrow. So, Lene, we'll start with you.
So on this bus tour, we partnered with Kendrick Sampson's organization, Build Power. And we just, as we talked to people, we started having this cute little mantra, we're building power with good people. And Kendrick talked about voting is not the end all be all as far as the answer to revolution and change, but it is a tool, and it's one of the most powerful tools. And I don't know if I completely, I do agree with him on his sentiment, but what I will say is I believe voting is the premier alternative to us giving our bodies away.
Mm.
Voting is how we fight back. Honestly and truthfully, I do not want to see us give any more blood to changing the world and shaping it the way that we need it to be, when there's opportunity for us to learn the system and change the system. And Hill Harper was so correct in that. And I think it was he that said it. You can say that you don't think any progress has happened, but for a Black woman to be at the top of the ticket, when Black women have not had the right to vote for as many years as everybody else, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but we are steamrolling in progress, and we are getting opportunities to violently shake the table. And I say this often because I'm experiencing it personally, but breakthrough should feel like the ground is shaking. It should feel like the walls are closing in. That is how you know something good is on the other side, but faith without works is dead, and you have to do your part. You hear people get super serious about voting because it is that serious. Like you guys said, this would be the last time we need to talk about.
If I could offer like a final word, I think for me, sorry, it's lagging for me, so it's kind of like coming back in my headphones. But I think for me, I would just ask that as a country, we decide like once and for all exactly what type of country we're going to be. And for me, it feels like we're at an inflection point. And it feels like we have a very good chance right now to preserve the frameworks that we need to preserve in order to set our own battlefield. I'm under no delusion that every answer will be provided by this election. I'm not under no delusion that we're going to solve every issue with this election. The problem is that if you cannot win in a scenario, if you cannot accomplish everything you need to, that's no reason to not try at all. If the very minimum is that we get to set the battlefield for what we need to do and who we're going to be facing later when it comes time to do right by the people, then you have to do that in every single scenario. And for me, I think it'll mean a lot if this country can decide definitively in the face of somebody who's threatening to every single like value that we like to tell ourselves as Americans is good and that was fought for. If we can decide right now that area, that far right-wing fascism, that descent into madness and demonizing and scapegoating of our fellow Americans, if we can decide that that's not what we want to do anymore as a people and that's not what we are for, that provides me a lot of hope that things can change, and things have changed. By no means are we in this scenario where we've had no alteration of how we view each other. We've gone from stuff like slavery to all of us sitting here discussing what's going to happen tomorrow. And it wasn't by any like miracle. It was work. It was constant work. And people did have to bleed, but it was constant work and fighting and letting the cards fall where they may. And you have to continue to do that every single day, because there are people who can't. And there are people who've done it. There are people who can't do it. And there are people who will never get the opportunity to if we make the wrong decision. So I think whether it's for your family, whether it's for somebody that you know, or whether it's for a random stranger, I think you owe it to them to do your civic duty tomorrow and let your voice be heard and fight the good fight.
Amen.
Wow.
Thank you both. Lene Beni, Joshua Joseph.
Thank you.
Thank you for using your platforms to engage, educate folks all around the country about the importance of voting and making sure that we actually hold on to our democracy. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay.
That was a good conversation.
Yeah. We're at the tail end of our town hall tonight. Before we conclude our town hall, we just want to give you a few reminders. First, you don't know where your polling station is. You don't know when it's opening. You don't know when it's closing. You can get all of that information at one website. It's called iwillvote.com. It has all of the information that you could need about the nearest polling location, the hours of the polls. Depending on the locality and when things might shift, it is all on that website. So that's the first reminder. Second, if you have challenges getting to a polling station, there is help on the way. And we have someone who is joining us as our last guest of the evening, Beth Link, who is the executive director of an organization called When We All Vote. You may have heard of it. Michelle Obama's voting engagement organization, When We All Vote. Beth Link is the head of that organization, and she is going to join us just for a few minutes to talk about, for folks who may need help getting to the polling station, there is help on the way. Beth?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to join at the very tail end. And I will say, Lene and JJ really inspired me in that last session. And so, and this entire town hall has been amazing. So I'm really here to help with resources to get to the poll and to ensure that you can make your voice heard. So thank you, Alfonso. Thank you, Ebony. So first and foremost, When We All Vote is really proud to be partnering with Lyft and Lime to ensure that if you need a ride to the polls, you can get one at a free or discounted rate. So in all 50 states, you can use the code VOTE24, that is VOTE24 in your Lyft app, to get a discounted ride to your polling location. So don't let having a ride to the polls be a barrier to voting. Make sure that you are able to get to your polling location and to vote. That code is VOTE24. In locations where Lime bikes and scooters are available, you can also use a Lime code to get free and discounted rides to the polls as well. And we encourage you to do that. The last thing I will just say is I just want to remind you of your rights. So if you are voting on election day, know that you have a right to stay in line if you are in line before the polls close. You have a right to ask for a paper ballot if you prefer to vote on paper, or if a computer isn't working for you or isn't working. If you're getting questioned about your citizenship status, your criminal record, or other qualifications, you have a right to ask for help. And 1-866-OUR-VOTE is available with volunteers on standby to help you make sure that you can make your voice heard tomorrow. Just like Alfonso said, we have resources available at whenweallvote.org if you need a plan to vote or need help finding your polling location. Happy voting tomorrow, and make sure to check on your friends, your family, your voting squad to make sure that all of them have a plan to vote tomorrow as well. Thank you so much, Alfonso. Thank you, Ebony.
No. Thank you so much, Beth, for joining us. And just for folks, this is real because in certain parts of the country, polling stations in Black communities closed. So in the last election, if you went to a certain polling station, that polling station may be closed. And you may realize that there's a challenge now in getting to the new polling station and is further from your house. So if that's the case, we want to make sure that you have the ability to get to that polling station, which is why the partnership with Lyft and When We All Vote is so important. Beth, can you once again remind folks what the code is if they want a lift to the polls?
Thank you so much. And I'd actually encourage everyone to share this with your friends and family as well, so that they don't miss out on this savings and this discount code. It is VOTE24. So VOTE, VOTE 24, the numbers 2 and 4. So put that in your Lyft app and make sure that you're getting that free and reduced ride to the polls.
Thank you. Beth, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all of your help and support.
Thank you.
Look, in addition to knowing about how to get basic information about voting and resources to support you in voting, we also want to once again remind you all about protecting your right to vote. As you know, we discussed the ongoing problem of voter suppression laws. Part of some of those polls being locations being moved are a part of voter suppression laws and tactics around the country. And this is where folks make it more difficult for you to vote and have your voice be counted. 2 weeks ago, we held a town hall meeting dedicated to voter protection, and we are encouraging all of you all to go back and watch it. You can find all of our town halls on YouTube on the GBEF channel. So make sure you go to that channel and go and binge watch the shows that we've done in the past. But for those who may not have time to watch, please remember one phone number. You got the Lyft information if you need a ride, but this number, please don't forget. It is 1-866-OUR-VOTE. 1-866-OUR-VOTE. If you're going to post something tonight, post that. Now, use that hotline if you confront any type of challenges in voting, or if you see someone else confronting challenges in voting. If you see something, say something.
I mean, it's so important, right? Because during our town hall, folks didn't understand. There was one key point. I think, Ebony, you may have flagged this for folks, that if you see police officers outside of a polling station, that is not normal. That's not supposed to happen.
No, they're
So
not.
that is something that you should flag.
Yeah. And I didn't know that at first. It was a lawyers committee who told me.
Yeah.
And it was an intimidation tactic that was keeping people from, they were literally driving past the polls when they saw that. Armed guards.
Correct. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of our speakers who've joined us over the past several months. We hope that you have more information now. We hope that you register to vote. We hope that you do vote. We've said this time and time again, every single town hall. Our right to vote is sacred. Our ancestors died for the right for us to vote. And if we don't exercise our right to vote, we are basically giving away our freedom to instill all of the values that we care about in our democracy. We hope that this town hall once again serves a meaningful resource for you. We want to thank the Sundial Group of Companies, Essence and the Global Black Economic Forum, Girls United, Afropunk, Refinery 29, BeautyCon, and the New Voices Foundation for continuing to support this town hall.
Thank you also, Alfonso, for allowing me and inviting me on to be your co-host. I have enjoyed the conversations and I've actually learned a lot. Look, everyone, the stakes are high, very high. And we want to make sure that you have the information, the resources, and the support to exercise your right to vote and to protect your future. This is our final town hall of this election season, and we look forward to everyone having a safe and calm election season. And make sure you paint the polls black. Visit paintthepolls.com for future events and resources.
And so this is not the last time you will see us. We will be back, but this is certainly the last, well, you know, post-election, we have certification issues.
Yes. Oh God.
We have a lot more to talk about, as you've heard from all of our guests. The right to vote is something that we should do, but there's also accountability after Election Day. And we want to make sure that we continue to provide you with meaningful information. So once again, hope you have a safe Election Day tomorrow. We hope that you all vote tomorrow. And we hope that we are advancing our democracy tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll just leave it there.
See you at the polls.
Thank you all.